The Warehouse is open, volume number 68, Game Worn, from collecting to long-term value. It's still a hobby. Pleased to be joined by Barry Meizel, President and COO of MeiGray. Dave Meizel, Director, Sales, Caps, Wild Sales Lead as well. Of course, at MeiGray.com. Check them out right now. NHL and then some. Columbus, Minnesota, New Jersey, Nashville, not necessarily in that alphabetical order. Philadelphia, Washington, NBA galore, including amazing stuff from the Warriors and the Lakers, WNBA, from Golden State, from Las Vegas, and a lot more. Barry, Dave, welcome back. What's going on in these inside the hallowed halls of the Warehouse these days? Good to see you, gentlemen.
Well, thanks, Scott. What's going on right now is we're seeing that sports collectibles, there's been a couple of years in the making of become an asset class. It's so funny. We talk about the love of the nostalgia. We talk about the intrinsic value of connection between the fan and the game. That is now blending in some great stew with people who now see collectibles as an asset class. So it's very interesting that we're going to talk about values, both short-term and long-term, because there's so much that it's not a stock where you can look at an up and down graph. You have to look at the love of the item. You have to look at the value of the item in context to other items in the sport, in the team, with the team, who the player is. But there's so many factors that make it a fun conversation. I'm looking forward to the next 30 minutes.
Oh, so am I. Dave, good to see you as always. Talk to me a little bit about sort of the evolution from when you first came aboard and saw this. And I'll ask the same question of Barry as well. But things have evolved to this point, and it's going to continue to evolve.
Yeah, it's at a point where, both on the business side and on the collector side, values are going up and up and up throughout the spectrum. Comparing it to, like, you can go back to when we started the NHL program, or you can go back to 10 years ago, and you're seeing that, there's always nostalgia fuel in this hobby. Whereas I remember a time, I wasn't working here yet, well, that contemporary guys in the NHL, their game worn jerseys were selling for $200-$300, and now those are vintage and nostalgia bait items that sell for 5, 6, 7, 800, 900, up to 2,000 or more, because this guy's a popular podcast host now, or this guy's a coach elsewhere in the National Hockey League.
Sure.
It's really interesting to see, because at that time, the hobby was so nascent that we were still seeing, we hadn't seen the budding until, like, essentially a whole generation in the hobby had passed by.
Barry, as far as the collector approach, has it always been what it is today? How has that changed?
If you live in the MeiGray world, whether you're one of my employees or your collector comes in, you've always heard me talk about, and I've said this many times in expos, it's not just the demand, it's not just the supply, it's the supply-demand ratio. And I think that speaks to what Dave just said. When we were selling jerseys 20 years ago for $295, there may have been 1/3 as many collectors of a given team, and those jerseys were the most recent, so they were seemingly the most plentiful. But 20 years later, a generation of jerseys later, with so many products on the market, if you're collecting, whether it's the Anaheim Ducks or goaltenders or whatever your theme is, now there are many, many more goaltender jerseys, but there are many, many fewer 1992, 93 original 6 goaltender style jerseys. And then maybe 10 times as many collectors who said, oh, wow, I saw pictures of, the NHL did a throwback series in 1992. I got to get one from every team. So all of the themes and all of the eclectic elements of whatever you collect over time add to the intrinsic and real value, because they're rarer items as more items come into the market that are not those style of items.
We'll get to the things that you just can't control. Nobody can control whether it's a franchise suddenly up and moving, and that may add a bump. Hey, this is a defunct logo. There are teams that switch out colorways and logos and do uniform redos. There are players that get, God forbid, injured. There are players that get traded. There are players that fall out of favor for a variety of reasons. None of this stuff is within our, hey, I liked him when he did this. I liked her when she did this in her WNBA rookie season. And then whatever happened? Well, there's a lot of things that happened. She became a victim of a roster number crunch. No fault of anyone's. Now you have a piece that hopefully you still like. And because she brought you or he brought you a 50-goal season that you were able to see with your kids. There's so many things that tie you to it, but there are also just as many things that you can't control about, hey, why isn't it this? Why did it not appreciate, and why did it depreciate? And there's a lot of stuff to get to. But real quick, Dave, over to you. So you deal with a lot of the customer base, and there are collectors and consigners, and they come to you and they're like, hey, I bought this for a nominal price way back when. It's worth what? Talk to me a little bit about that surprise when people do find out that their piece has matured in a way, again, no control by themselves, but stuff does. They do tend to benefit once in a while, and that's a good thing. Talk to me about the relationship, the reaction from the collector and consigner.
Yeah, so I actually have one in my inbox right now who I'm working with. And just to give you an example, pulled up the first jersey in this collection, which will be available on MeiGray.com soon. So we've got a 1996 New York Giants Roman Oben white game issued jersey. This is literally one of the first jerseys MeiGray ever sold. It's the old, I guess, what would you call it? It's the heritage style or the legacy style. I can't remember the vernacular in
The
today's
style they wore yesterday.
NFL.
They wore it yesterday. So that now
Yes.
considered the throwback for the 90s
Yeah.
Super Bowl era.
It's a
Yeah.
great
So Roman Oben, good tackle, right? Or
Offensive
maybe a
tackle,
guard, good
solid.
lineman.
No, not a superstar, but a solid player.
Yeah. And so customer paid $63 for this jersey back in 2000. And again, so okay, yes, it is a game issue jersey from a lineman, but that's something that retails for a couple $100 these days. So you're talking about 4 or 5x your value for something you paid $63 for back in the day. So there's gold in the streets, really. If you got in on this hobby early, you're sitting on stuff that has a lot more value than there is now. Now, of course, the value of the dollar has changed, and there's the economy, and there's all these other factors for certain, but the appreciation in the hobby outstrips all that.
And I'll add to the fact that this is not stock. The guy who paid $63 in 2000 wasn't buying it as an investment. He was buying it so he could enjoy his hobby, and it probably sat in his man cave when he was 21 or 41, and now he's moved to Florida and he's retired. And so there's the, again, intrinsic fact that we were collecting this because we loved it, but it was also a pretty good investment when you look back and say, well, I wish I was as smart as to know to do that so I could sell it back 20 years later.
If you can catch lightning in a bottle, it's lovely. Sometimes it does occur, sometimes it doesn't. And again, we'll get to a lot of the factors and what have you. When you guys are talking to the collectors on the phone or via email, how do you help them recognize that there is something, there may be a there? And again, you guys don't have crystal balls. They don't have crystal balls. You never know what's going to happen. Is there any part of the conversation that becomes there might be a there, but you're collecting this for you because, Barry, like you said, you're a hobbyist. Enjoy it.
Well,
you don't
I'll
need...
I'll take that one because I think my experience, I started collecting in 1979. Let's face it, there are a lot of people who weren't alive and didn't even know I was already collecting one of the 26 nuts who thought it'd be great to have a piece of dirty laundry from my favorite team.
Sure.
So I remember and I say to people a lot when I enter these conversations now, this fad is now working on 50 years. It's not a fad. There is real value to nostalgia. We see it now. Now, every time there's a movie, you can get a relic from the movie. People love this stuff. So when you start with that very fact that all of this stuff, this entire genre has risen because of the supply-demand ratio and the fondness for something that today's young collector didn't see from 40 years ago, you're always going to have, I don't want to call it profitability, I want to call it growth with the enjoyment of the hobby. And that's when someone says, well, what's this going to be worth in 20 years? I'm going to say, I don't know. I can only tell you what happened in the last 50.
Right.
So that's a fun conversation to have, and I have that one often.
No, definitely. And Dave, I saw a piece recently on CBS Sunday Morning about a gentleman who auctions off high dollar watches, whole lot of Rolex, and he's very entertaining, speaks 5 or 6 languages, holds a gavel, and can keep it moving. He's really, really good at getting the most out of those holding the auction paddles. To his credit, they also auction off really beautiful pieces. Again, not an atmosphere in which I fly, but I liked the piece and I wanted to bring that to this table. The gentleman said when he's working that room as an auctioneer that I guess the interview, one of the questions was something like, do you ever imagine pieces, watches would go for, 10, $15 million? And he said, these people love these collectibles. These people love these collection pieces. And you can't put a price tag on that sort of love. I imagine that no matter what is spent on a certain sweater, people get attached to it. They also may not want to let it go, but it may be time to let it go. Real life may intervene. Other wants and needs and desires and situations may pop up. Maybe you're lucky enough that you caught lightning in a bottle and a kid's wedding is coming up and you're like, I love this, but I'd like it to find a home where someone else will love it as well. I'm sure that there are experiences to share along those lines.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm just I'm looking through this collection again and I'm seeing I won't say the player yet, but Rangers Liberty jersey, and it's a gamer and it's a goalie. Like we didn't know you don't need a crystal ball now to look at like where that has come, but you don't know what's going to be nostalgia bait. I seem to recall people hating like the Pooh Bears when they were the Bruins alternate jersey, and then they became a reverse retro that was widely popular. And I think I'm getting away from your question a little bit, but
I tend to ramble.
No, I think you're on the right track because I got a story
Right.
as soon as you're finished of something from my own collection.
okay, go ahead.
So let's take the 1994 Rangers. When the Rangers finally won the Stanley Cup, and it was the first time in 54 years, there wasn't a MeiGray, but I was involved in advising the Rangers on how to market those to the collectors. And back then, the jerseys went for anywhere from $1,000 to $10,000 for the Messier. And everybody thought, holy cow, we'll never see something like that again. Well, the Rangers have not won a Stanley Cup. I own Craig McTavish's 1994 Stanley Cup Finals, Game 7. As a Ranger fan, I wanted that one. I was lucky enough to get that one back in 1995 because he was the last Ranger to touch the puck. He took that last faceoff, won it into the corner, and the Rangers won the Cup for the first time in 54 years. I paid $1,500 for that shirt. Dave knows the answer to this because he teases me as my son. I've said that one's going in my coffin. And they say, no, you're not, Daddy, or else we're going to exhume it. But I wouldn't sell that jersey for $1 million because of the intrinsic value. But all these years later, the Rangers now have not won a cup in 30 years. The 1994 team is now this romantic, oh my God, now there's new 40-year-olds or 30-year-olds who've never seen a cup. And I have something that if I ever put a Stanley Cup Finals jersey on the market, who knows where it'd go because there are only 20, 25 white ones. There are only 20 guys who played in that final game, 18 skaters two goalies. Mark Messier's finals jersey is in the Hackensack Children's uh, Medical Center on display on loan. The Hockey Hall of Fame has one. There are very, 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 very few. So that's one of those. The sky's the limit. To your point of the watch, who knows what it would go for?
Talking collecting, long-term value rundown, growth as the term that Barry used at guest today. Barry Meizel, president and COO of MeiGray. Dave Meizel, director, sales, Caps and Wilds. Of course, go to MeiGray.com. Before you know it, boys, as we record this in early November, the holiday sale is going to be upon us. We'll get to that towards the end, but the NHL season is kicked in. The NBA season is flowing, and Luka is on fire to start. Of course, Lakers stuff, Warriors stuff, WNBA, now out of season, but Golden State, the Valkyries, the Las Vegas Aces with some amazing pieces over at MeiGray.com. And again, the Caps, the Flyers, the Devils, the Preds, the Minnesota Wild, and the Columbus Blue Jackets as well. With the McTavish, that's an example of a milestone or a moment that has been frozen in time after 54 years and now going on 30 to 25, another 30 years since, if my math is pretty terrible, 31 years since. That's one of those moments that has, wow. But given the unpredictability of players, Barry, there are pieces that lose steam, sadly, or there's something that become white hot because of a single moment or a milestone. I'm sure you have countless stories of things like that.
Yeah. And the thing that's interesting, and the thing I always discuss when a collector asks me about that is I ask him first about his focus. Are you collecting to invest? Or are you collecting to collect? So I want to know that, because if someone says, I really want to build a man cave, I love the Philadelphia Flyers, I say, then don't worry about predicting, is this guy going to become the next Bobby Orr, or is he going to flame out in 2 years? Collect what you like, because you never know. If you're strictly investing, it's a different story. Then you may pick the hot young first round pick. You may pick a charismatic young player who you think has upside because he's going to become a popular, whether he's a fighter or a goal scorer or a goalie. But then you have, of course, the reality that the career-ending injury. You have the lesser pleasant stories, off ice, off field events.
Sure.
That's unknowable. That's unpredictable. So the hobby, if anyone thinks that because the last 50 years was a rocket ship, it's without its drops, is being naive. So the drop in product, the drop in value is often because, just like the teams themselves, if you draft a guy in the first round and he's a bust, you're not going to say, well, I'll never use another first round pick on a player again. You'll try to be right next time. So it's the fact that nothing is guaranteed.
Dave, when you're looking at people's collections and something comes across, how do you know? Is there an instant vibe and you're like, you know what? I can't sit here. I'm not a fortune teller. I cannot predict the future, but there might be a there with something.
Well, just to beat my chest for a second, we generally do okay with consignments, no matter what they are. Someone comes in with a collection, you know, provided the asks aren't crazy, we usually do pretty well with it, because, like, at a certain point, it's just variety. If someone were to come in with a collection of, I don't know, Evgeny Kuznetsov jerseys, we've already got a bunch on the website. That might be something where, yeah, I don't know how we're gonna do, but most people have enough variety in their collection, and most of the time, what they have hasn't been seen in its current form, with every jersey being different. Um, that it's going to do generally pretty well, um, for them. I think, like, a recent example of something we just saw is, we sold the jersey, or have, we'll fix that in post. Um, we sold the jersey Joffrey Lupul scored 4 goals in to set the NHL postseason record of goals in a game. Like, that was I believe, that was a jersey people hadn't seen for 22, 23 years, give or take. You know, even though it's just Joffrey Lupul, it ends up being it's a nice piece because it's history. It doesn't matter that he played for 2 or 3 or 6 teams. It doesn't
Sure.
matter that he wasn't, Ilya Kovalchuk or Scott Stevens.
No, what
It's
matters is the moment. What matters is the milestone. What matters is the history that was obtained and performed while wearing that exact sweater.
And
yeah,
I'll
and
add,
I'll one more thing. I'll just say it's like it's not weird in sports fandom to be drawn to something eclectic. Like what me and my Giant fans friends my age talk about all the time. It's not the '07 season. It's not the 2011 season. It's not the 2000 season where they lost in the Super Bowl. It's
So,
2008 where they were 10 and
helmet
1.
catch. Go ahead.
It's 2008 where they were 10 and 1. Plaxico shot himself. They won the next game and then went 1 and 3 the rest of the way out and got dumped out of the playoffs by the Philadelphia Eagles. That was the best team any of us have ever saw and have ever seen. So, like, if I was I might want something from the 2008 Giants if I was collecting, because that's a season like there's no replicating it. Or the 2024 Mets is actually probably a better and more contemporary example. That season was so special for Mets fans. If you weren't part of Mets Twitter during this past season, that's all you ever saw. You saw the Lindor homer against the Phillies over and over and over again. And that team lost in the NLCS. Didn't even make it to the World Series. Didn't even win a pennant. So there's like in obscurity, there is obscurity isn't obscurity, I
yeah.
guess.
And I'll give you my example of obscurity as an obscurity. So our first deal with the ECHL was in 2000, 2001. We were getting 100. We got a set of jerseys, home and road, from every team in the league. And we were getting and happy to get 195 a jersey. Now, one of those teams happened to be, and I may be forgetting the exact team, but I'm making the point, the Macon Whoopee, a team that was one and done in 1 year, had a really funny name, had a great crest, and years later is, I got to find one of those. And in some cases, they go for thousands of dollars. The
Sure.
Kentucky Thoroughblades, the Columbus Cottonmouths, where a team was defunct. Nobody cared. They were getting 600 people a game, but the jerseys were so elaborate or special for whatever crazy reason that now San Francisco Spiders is another one.
Right.
You find these oddball jerseys where if you bought one back in the day for next to nothing, which is what it cost, you're sitting on gold. So obscurity sometimes is not obscurity in 20 years later in our collecting world.
Talking to Barry Meizel, Dave Meizel. It's Tales from the Warehouse, Volume 68, talking about collecting and sort of the growth rundown and what it looks like, what it might look like, how many variables there are, and there are loads of them. Miami Matadors, Barry, comes to
There's
mind.
another one. Yep.
Those other teams and there's lots and lots of backstories. When you get one of these sort of test of time sweaters, is it still important, photo matching, player usage, wear, game significance, or when you have that stuff, can't ever hurt, but it may not be as important in a moment like that?
Well, I will say this, Scott, and authentication is always important. So we start
Absolutely.
with that tenet that I can't imagine somebody was faking a Miami Matadors jersey back in the day, but somebody may have tried to fake one now because of what happened back in the day.
Because what they know about, exactly.
So we're always checking that. But I'll give you a good quick story on something that just happened a week ago. I authenticated a New York Raiders World Hockey Association jersey.
Oh, wow.
There were very, very few. I'd say a good, solid. I mean, they didn't really have a superstar. They only lasted 1 year. The last one that went in auction 3 years ago went for $41,000. Little known, though, is that Jerry Cosby and Company, one of the famous customizers from back in the day, actually, and I know this because I was a teenager going to the games and looking at these jerseys like I just seen the Holy Grail, they would sell the actual authentics when nobody was doing that, hanging them from the drop ceiling at the Garden before games. So you could actually buy a New York Raiders, I wouldn't even call it game ready, but a Doreen jersey back in the day. One of those, and I knew this because they weren't exactly the same cut of letters up, name on back. They were one of the few teams that had names on back in the day. And there was no wear on the jerseys, perfectly clean. And somebody was saying, is this a game worn Raiders jersey that's worth 40,000, or what is it, MeiGray? And I know because I'm a million years old, and that they actually one of the few teams that sold these, and that's clearly what it was. We happened to have authenticated about 7 years ago another one of these. Now, even though it wasn't worn 7 years ago, we got $5,000 for that shirt, and I told the guy this is a $7,500 shirt because of what it was. So there's a good example of the authentication and the intrinsic value and the romantic story of a very, very rare relic. Put it, even though it wasn't a game-worn jersey.
All right, so take me back to earlier in this podcast. We talked about you dealing with collector. Collector A comes through the door or contacts you by email, and you say, are you in this for man cave and appreciation and love of the team, or are you investing? There's then this sort of fork in the road. Well, I'd like to invest, and again, past performance is never about future results. This is not, there are 8 trillion different factors that could happen to said player, said franchise, said sweater, yada, yada, yada. Maybe they say, I'd like to just pick up some lower end price range things or higher end price range things. Sort of take me through the advantage, disadvantage of, you know what? There's always a way to have fun in the hobby for $350 sweaters, or there's always a way to have fun in the hobby for $3,000 sweaters or higher. Talk to me about that conversation, Bear.
Well, in those cases, I definitely can advise people, and that's where you talk about, depending on your price point, but nevertheless, even at the low price points, pick a guy that you think has a shot. Play amateur scout with yourself, with your hobby, and say, oh, this guy's got potential. He's popular. I see him as a guy that if I ever want to get my money out, or if I want to trade it for a better player down the line, I can do that. So I remind people then to do yourself scouting. Pick a team that's more popular. Pick a team or pick a player that's you think has upside, and take into account the reality that if you're trying to make money, it's harder if you buy a shirt at 2,000. It's harder to make money because a lot more things have to go right to turn them into 3,000, 1.5 than if you buy a $300 shirt and flip it in a year and a half for 500. Even though the ratios are right, more people have $500 than have 3,000. That's usually a common conversation I have. Dave, do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, and I will say, like, I still think it's early for this hobby. I mean, I still think there's very much, and in multiple sports, you see it, there's very much an if you know type um, mentality with collectors where, not everybody is super exposed to this on a mainstream level, and not everybody on a mainstream level maybe see the intrinsic value of it. Like the point still stands that when you look at a $3 million card that has a 1 inch by 1 inch piece of a jersey in it, and the corresponding jersey, which is worth, I don't know, $20,000, $30,000. There's a litany of examples of this. Something seems a little bit off, especially when you start talking about the fact that the cards don't even necessarily have the corresponding player's jersey piece in it. But that's a different issue. Um, but you know, slowly, but probably methodically, you're going to see more people recognize that it's the whole artifact itself that should be in the museum, should have value, should be, you know, should everyone should get a piece of in some way or another, rather than just, the 1 square inch piece. So I think it's the fact of the matter, like, I don't have a crystal ball. Am I saying that a that's $500 now is going to be $2,000 in 20 years? I don't know. But I'll tell you, in 20 years, a lot more people are going to know about this hobby and be participating in this hobby than are right now.
Dave, talk to me a little bit about value trends. You mentioned the Mets earlier. I know that you're also a basketball fan at heart. Can you speak to the trends outside of, let's say, hockey, and even do not a compare contrast, but throw out a touch of knowledge about the hockey, the basketball, a little bit of baseball, maybe not so much football, but are you seeing things with how things are trending regarding value in those markets as well?
Well, I think basketball in the middle and lower tiers has gone through a bit of volatility in the past 18 months and normal fluctuation, I'd say. There's more stuff on the market, but if you see the very, very top pieces are still getting substantial value. And I think Wembanyama is the guy who's really going to jump it into that next tier, because I think this season we've started to see, like, okay, this is the guy they drafted number 1 overall, and this is the guy who wants to bring the league into the next decade or so. Knock on wood, he stays healthy, but I think people are starting to see that. In baseball, there's great numbers, each of the last 2 postseason that have come out for Shohei Ohtani stuff, Freddie Freeman stuff. The Dodgers being at the top of the league is really good for collectibles because they have more name recognition than most teams in baseball, if not all. They've got the best player in terms of name recognition. A guy who, just to plug one of my favorite tweets, is doing things not seen since Tungsten Armo Doyle of the 1925 Akron Groomsmen. But it's like, it's easy to look at the top tier data points, but if you look all the way across the spectrum, collectibles are going up in value. And I'll also say the Dodgers are doing a great job curating their artifacts and getting them on display to the collectors and getting them available. That's one thing that you can't overlook, is the immediacy of the whole thing.
Barry,
Let me add one fact. Let me add one fact to that,
Right.
which, without saying it out loud, I'm going to say it out loud, and we're all going to say, "Oh, of course." They've mentioned Victor Wembanyama, France. He mentioned the Dodgers, of course, Shohei Ohtani, Japan. This has become a global phenomenon now. So we think of the United States and North America in our sports. Those days are gone. American professional football, baseball, basketball, hockey, these are global sports. We in the United States now look at the Premier League like it's one of our leagues. So when you have a global interest, that naturally, speaking of what Dave has all but guaranteed from his non-crystal ball, where we're going to be in 20 years, again, supply-demand ratio, many, many more collectors collecting these relics that are going to go up and up and up.
And Barry, you took the words out of my mouth. I was just going to say, my world is small. My world is the podcast. My world is the MeiGray Expo, the Northern Virginia Expo, some Facebook Marketplace, friends that I've made throughout the years. You, as president and COO of MeiGray, your exposure is on that sort of global market. You guys have clients all over the world. And whether it's marketing Lakers and Luka and Golden State, I mean, the NBA, whether it was Commissioner Stern before Adam Silver, I mean, Yao Ming and other players made this. That was the goal. The NBA wanted to be a global game, and it has accomplished it in astonishing force.
Yeah.
And the NFL's trying to do the same, whether it was the World League of American Football decades ago, and now, they have the Berlin game and the Madrid game and the Barcelona game and the games in the UK and the Mexico City game and the games in Rio de Janeiro. They're absolutely trying, whether it was the global games in Finland or Czech Republic or wherever they were for the NHL. They're trying. We come in contact, thanks to the internet, in Facebook forums. People are looking for players of particular country. My world is small. My vision is small. Yours is filled with exposure and people reaching out. So you do have sort of an advanced showing of what to expect as the hobby and it through various sports grows and expands.
Right. Right. And that breeds the supply-demand ratio and the desirability for these special moments. And more people wanting these one-of-a-kind relics is how this thing grows and grows and grows and keeps on rolling.
Guys, we'll start to wrap up with this. Talk to me a little bit about benefits when collectors / would-be consigners contact you. I just mentioned if I do it, maybe it's through Facebook, maybe I'm consigning a piece. There are certainly benefits to do it with the good folks at MeiGray.
You take that one, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, you're certainly, we aim to get max value for our clients, and we have the ability to do that in terms of our marketing reach, our customer database. There in a lot of cases, we are able to get final numbers that that are harder for collectors to get on their own. Facebook is a great tool for marketing stuff. So is eBay, but we have reach that overlaps the entire Venn diagram.
And
You're also going to get our expertise in terms of asking prices if you don't know what you want to get for your jerseys. In certain cases, we also may be open to offering you a buyout. So there's a lot of different ways to skin the cat when you come to MeiGray and you want to consign with us.
And I'll add the one thing I'm most proud of in my vision when I started the company now 28 years ago. Get real, get MeiGray. When you walk in these doors, whether you're a buyer or a seller, we're going to make sure we're vetting the collection. We're standing behind the collection. It is 100% what you're being offered. We check first. We ensure. So everybody's going to get exactly what they pay for.
Yeah, and one thing we add, I will say, is that if you bought jerseys from us 20 years ago, because of the amount of resources that are out there, we're able to add a lot more in terms of the authentication value, in terms of photo matches, in terms of it could be card matches. I mean, there's a lot that some collectors might have on their own, but some collectors might not. They might have just owned them and loved them and cared for them, and now want to sell them. So we can always, everything that comes through MeiGray's doors for sale, it gets a pass through our authentication department, and most of the time that's going to add value, especially if it's a shirt we sold before.
Gentlemen, as we head towards the holidays, we are now just, let's call it 3-ish weeks shy of Thanksgiving. Obviously, again, the NBA is kicking into high gear. Contact the good folks at MeiGray, MeiGray.com, sales at MeiGray.com for not only the NHL with the Jackets, the Wild, the Preds, the Devils, the Caps, and the Flyers, but obviously amazing stuff with the Warriors having a whale of a start, the Lakers having a pretty impressive start with some just outlandish numbers being put up by Luka and Austin Reeves and the like. And again, great stuff through the WNBA catalog featuring the Golden State Valkyries and the Las Vegas Aces. But the holiday sale will be here before long, boys. Not asking to, take us inside of Santa Meisel's workshop or whatnot, but it'll be here soon. It's got to be an exciting / crazy time of year with both the NBA and the NHL in high gear, and the holiday sales right around the corner.
The holiday sale's one of my two favorite times. The other is the summer sale.
Sure.
Because we like to give back. We like to have fun with it. We like to remind the collectors that we're collectors as well. And we know that if you're buying a gift for someone, if you're buying a gift for yourself, you want to get good values. So we have a think tag, and Dave, I think's already planned the meeting where, all right, what are we going to do for the holiday sale? That's always a fun time around here when we game plan, script it, and then announce it to the collecting hobby. So that's only a couple of weeks away.
In the words of George Costanza, Dave probably stands up at that meeting and says, not I got a lot of problems with you people. It's not Festivus. That would be he stands up like Costanza and he's like, you want to get nuts? Let's get nuts. And then Dave starts throwing out really cool ideas to make product available. And people are like, that's a great price. I'm diving in. Gentlemen, always good to catch up with you. Appreciated. Barry Meizel, Dave Meizel, MeiGray, MeiGray.com, sales@MeiGray.com. Get on those request lists. It's never too late. Gentlemen, until next time, this has been Game On, from collecting to long-term growth, if you will. It's volume 68. Until next time, The Warehouse